Hi everyone, welcome. We are so excited to have you here as you start your journey towards New York City Specialized High School Admissions Test SHSAT. In this video, we're covering a math lesson to build the foundation you'll be needing to get a top score. Before we begin, be sure to have a pen and notebook ready with you because we'll be talking about many tips and strategies throughout, so make sure that you do have all of the necessary equipments so that you can note down anything that you find important. Also, if you cannot afford expensive tuitions, don't worry. Our free lessons and practices are more than enough to help you prepare completely for your exam. Plus, our app also offers a predictive test, which is going to give you a realistic feel of what the exam is going to feel like. Now, let's get started and take the first step towards landing into one of New York City's specialized high schools. So like I said before, if you would want more practice materials, make sure to download our SHSAT Prep app from Apple App Store, where you are going to find lots of different practice materials so that you do not need expensive tutoring anymore. Without any further ado, let's get ahead with the video. So in this lesson, we are going to learn about percentages, decimals, basically how to convert percent to a decimal, again, decimal to a percent, how to convert percent to a whole, and so on. So there's a lot of things that we're going to learn in this particular lesson. So let's go on. For the first example, we need to convert these decimals into percents, all right? So basically, whenever we look at percents, what we see is a percentage sign, yeah? Which means that anything that you do see in a percentage sign is basically whatever it is in terms of 100. So let's say if I get 40%, that means I'm getting 40 out of 100. Okay, that's what it means. So let's try to convert them. So the first step in conversion is, of course, to multiply each of these with 100. So to do that, we do this into 100, 0.15 into 100, 3.35 into 100, and I hope you get this gist. So this is basically what we need to do for either of these values. Okay, so now what? Now, the thing is, because we're multiplying it with 100 and 100 has how many zeros? It has 2 zeros. This means that the decimal that's already there is going to go right up to 2 digits. So because we have 0.4 here, if you have two numbers, if you have 2 zeros, this decimal point is going to go 2 units to the right. Now, if you see here properly, there's a missing gap over here. This gap needs to be filled with another 0. So what do I say? Can I write 040 now? Yes, I can. But we know that any 0 that comes up in front of the number does not really have any value. So this means that it's just plain old 40. But because we have already converted it to a percent, we need to put the percentage symbol. How about 0.15? Let's try to get some on our own, yeah? So because this has 2 zeros and this has 2 numbers right next to it, so if I go 1 and 2, so that does not give us any empty space, does it? So it's just 15%. How about this one? Once again, next to the decimal, we have 2 numbers like this. So we can just write 335%, keeping the first 3 the same. Why? Because, of course, that's a 3, that's not a 0, right? So this is why I have kept the 3 the same. How about this one? 0.06 times 100. Once again, if you think about it, 0.06, taking it to 2 units to the right, that just ends up with 6 because the zeros in front does not really have a value. So we can just write 6%. How about this? 0.005. So let's see, 0.005. Putting it to 2 units to the right, that gives me 1 and then 2. So here, if you see this properly, that gives me what? 0.5. Now, these 2 digits does not really have any value, but this does because it has a decimal right next to it. So the answer to this is going to be 0.5%. Let's try to do this in our head, okay? 2 zeros is going to go 2 units to the right. So that is 0.77%, just eliminating any other zeros in the front of it, okay? I hope you did get it. So here was a quick example of how to convert these decimals into percents. All right, here are some practice materials for you. Of course, you can take a screenshot of this. You can bring out your notebook and try to do them on your own and check if you did get all of these answers correctly. Okay. Now, it's the opposite. We need to convert these percents to decimal numbers, okay? It's the opposite. So just like we did multiplication, we did times 100. Now, for this particular math, we need to do divided by 100. So basically what you do is you need to do all of these percents that you see, you need to divide all of these by 100. So let me just write this down real quick. And 0.045 divided by 100. So when it comes to division, what happens is, because when it came to multiplication, we took the decimal some units to the right, haven't we? But because we are now dividing it, we need to put the decimal point some units to the left. If you look at number 3 here, if you look at the number that is 3, of course, on the first glance, we don't see any decimal. But if there is no decimal, there's always an invisible decimal right next to the original number that's already there. So if it's 2, it means there's a 2.0. If it's 3, it's 3.0. If it's 1,000, it's 1,000.0. I hope you do get it. So for 3 here, there's an invisible decimal right here, right next to it. And it's getting divided with 100, which has 2 zeros, which means that because we're dividing it, we need to put it to the left. We are going to take the decimals 2 units to the left. Now what happens here? There's a gap here. We need to fill that gap with 0. And right before the decimal, let's put just another 0 right there. So that's going to be 0.03. Let's look at 40 over 100. So 40, quite easily, there's an invisible decimal here. Putting it 2 units up front, that just gives me what? That just makes it 40. Right? But of course, because now there's a decimal right here, we need to put a decimal right here, and we can put the 0 up front. By the way, you can also, if you want to, you can eliminate this 0 right here, because like I said, it does not have any value. How about this? How about 0.8? So 0.8 already has a decimal, but still is going to go 2 units to the left. There's a blank here. Let's fill it with a 0. Let's put another 0 right here. So that gives me 0.008. How about this? 500 over 100. Now, 500 over 100, that's just what? 1, 2. So that gives us what? That makes it 5.0. 5.0 is essentially 5. And finally, for 0.045, because this already has decimals, putting it 2 units to the left gives me what? There's an invisible decimal right here. And let's put another 0 right here. So that gives me 0.00, again, a 0.45. So 0.00045. Hope you did understand how to convert percents to decimal numbers. Moving on. Here are a couple of practice materials once again, how to convert these percents to decimals, as you can see. Okay, so now we have percents, and we also have something called off here. So in maths, whenever we look at off, basically this off represents a multiplication sign, okay? So what they're trying to find out is 5.5% times 3.5, okay? So the first step for this is to convert this 5.5% into a decimal. So how do we do that? We know that percent sign means that it's divided by 100. So if we take 5.5 and if we divide it with 100, this means the decimal point goes 2 units to the left. The decimal is now here. There's a blank. We put a 0 here. We put a 0 here. So my final answer to this is going to be 0.055, right? Now you do times 3.5 here. Okay, what you can do now is you can use a basic formula. Like if you clearly remember, there was another class where we actually did this. If you have numbers like these with decimals, you can ignore the decimals. So you can just write 55 and you can just write 35. Let me just do this real quick. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry the 2. 5 times 5 is 25 plus 2 is 27. Put a 0 here. 5 times 3 is 15. Carry the 1. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 1 is 16. That adding up gives me 5. 7 and 5 is 12. Carry the 1. 2 and 1 is 3. And 6 is 9. So that's 1925. However, this has one decimal, right? One number next to the decimal. This has 3 numbers next to the decimal. In total, there are 4 numbers next to these decimals, which means that from the right, we now need to go 4 units in the up top. So what that means is the final answer is going to be 0.1925. Got it? So whenever we look at decimals, this is something that's very important. It's very important to figure out how many numbers there are, what they are trying to do. And here we have a very, very similar math. Let's just do this real quick. So 0.05%, what that really means is 0.05 over 100. And in doing so, what we do is we put this decimal 2 units to the left. If we do that, there's a blank here, there's a blank here. So my final answer to this is 0.000, and then there's a 5. Off means multiplication. We're multiplying that to 0.5. Now, quite easily, we know 5 and 5 together is 25. But what about the decimals? Here we have one number next to the decimal. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 numbers next to the decimals, right? In total, there are 5. We don't see a decimal right here, but we know there is an invisible decimal right after the number. So now we can put what? 4 and 1. 5 units to the front. So let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we now have a decimal here. Let's now fill in the gaps. It's going to be a 0, and a 0, and a 0 in the front. So my final answer to this is going to be 0.00025. Okay? So far, so good. Yeah, I hope you did get all of these correctly. And if you did, make sure to follow these practice questions as well and try to see if you've got the answers matched. Okay. Now, we have a similar type of question, but it just asks the question in a different way. So it basically wants 3.86 is what percent of this. So far, we have figured out this of this percent gives me what. So in this case, the answer is already given. We need to know some part of the question, just like if we follow the previous one. It's just that we are doing the opposite thing. If we're doing the opposite thing, it means that we are dividing because previously we had multiplied, right? So now we have to divide. We have to divide what with what? With 3.86 and 24.125. So that's what we do first. How do we do that? Now, if you properly remember, in one of my previous lessons, I have actually taught you that to divide, multiplicate, to divide decimals, what you can do is you can put the divisor in the correct order. And to do that, you need to remove any sort of decimal points first. So in the divisor, we have 3 numbers, which means that we need to multiply that to 1 and 3 zeros. And if we do that, we need to do the same thing to the numerator. That gives me what? That gives me in the denominator 24125, but in the numerator, what that gives me is, because it's 3 zeros here, that means it's going to go 3 units to the right. And if I fill in the gap with a 0, my final answer to this is going to be 3860, right? Now what? Now let's just divide this in our basic format because I believe I've taught you this before in a previous lesson. So if you do this to this, of course, the first number is going to be a 0 because, of course, this number is smaller than this. So first of all, that's what you're going to end up with. Then you put a decimal, which is going to give you an extra 0. Now you can actually put a 1 right here, and that's going to give you what? That's going to give you 24125. Then you subtract and so on. So I think you already know how to do this. So I'm just going to jump straight into the answer. The answer is 0.16. However, the question said, what is this in a form of a percentage? And as we've already learned, to convert anything to a percent, we need to multiply it with 100. And in doing so, the decimal goes 2 units to the right. So that means it's 16 followed by the percentage symbol. Okay? I hope you did get this one correctly. And if you did, here's another math that's in the exact same format. So I'm not going to take a lot of time because I've already explained to you the previous one in details. I'm just going to tell you what to do. This is what percent of this. This means that basically we need to divide this with this. That is it, okay? When you do that individually, of course, you're supposed to do times 10 and times 10 so that it gives you 727.6. But here you get 214. And then you divide it in your usual format. So that will give you 3.4, okay? But my question asks for a percent, which means that, of course, I need to convert that to a percent by multiplying it with 100, which gives me what? That brings me 2 units to the right. So that's 3 and 4. And in that gap, I'm going to put a 0. Finally, I'm going to put a percentage sign. Okay? So far, so good. So we have actually seen 2 maths in the exact same format, which is why it gives us a practice question, as you can see. Hope you do get the answer correctly as well. All right. Now, in this case, it's also one of the similar types of questions. However, it asks for the first value, as in if we go backwards, in that case, the first value that comes across, that is the amount that it's asking. $722 is 38% of which amount? So in questions like this, we can actually assume that the amount that they're talking about is X. Okay, we can assume that let the amount that we do need to figure out is X. So if we do that, in that case, we can actually write something like this. We can say 38% of which amount, right? See, of means what? Multiplication. The amount is what? X. And then the answer is going to be what? 722. So 38%, if you convert that to a decimal, that gives me 0.38. We've already learned how to do that, haven't we? Now, if you use basic algebra, because these two numbers are getting multiplied here, if you want to put it to the other side, that's going to just end up dividing it with each other. Now what? Now we convert that to a basic number by multiplying it with 100. That gives me 72200 over 38. You now will do it in your own format, and it's going to end up with 1,900. Hope you did get it. Oh, also, don't forget to put the dollar sign. So moving on to the next question, if you did understand this, here we have another practice question. Make sure that you do check your answer if you've got this correctly. And yeah, let's now see, we have fractions, we have percentages all together, but it's totally fine. We do know how to convert everything to the same format, right? Because of means what? Multiply. Of means multiply. So that's basically 16% times 5 over 7 times 560. First of all, what you can do is you can convert that percentage sign to a fraction. And how do we do that? We know that to convert that, we need to just divide it with 100. Now what you can do is, basically we've already learned that for evaluating fractions and whenever we have multiplications, we can actually simplify them. And to simplify, you can either simplify up and down or crisscross, but never side to side. So now let's see, we have a 0 here, we have a 0 here. We can actually cancel these zeros out. We can also give 7 times 1 and 7 times 8, okay? Now we can do 2 times 4 as 8 and 2 times 5 as 10. We can now go for 5 times 1 and 5 times 1. What else do we have? We have a 16 over here, we have a 4 over here. We can cancel it sideways, which means that we need to multiply them. And 16 times 4 is 64. Okay, hope you got this one correctly as well. And let's move on to the next question. Okay, here's another practice maths. As you can see, make sure that you do get 0.8. It looks kind of tricky, but it's very simple, okay? Yeah. So for this particular question, we have a word problem here. David practiced shooting basketballs and made 35 out of 60 shots. How many? 35 out of means division, 60. Okay, what percent of shots did he miss? Okay, if we want to know how many he did miss, what we can do is, let's first figure out how many he missed. To do that, we are going to subtract the total number of shots to the ones that he made, yeah? So if we do that, 60 minus 35, that's 25. Now, because it's asking for something as a percentage, That means we are supposed to put whatever he has missed over the total, which is 60, multiply that to 100, and then put just a percent sign because we need to finally figure it out in the form of percent. Let's now simplify it like this. 0 and the 0, 2 times 3, 2 times 5. We cannot simplify any further. So that just gives us 25 times 5 is what? 25 times 5 is 125 over 3. However, what we have here is a percent, yeah? So you can actually keep it like this if you want to, or you can divide it and form it into a decimal, and in that case your answer is going to be 41.67%. Either of these formats are fine. It depends on what the question asks. If the question did not say anything, I think you can put it as it is, or it's I think it's like being on the safe side, you can actually put it in middle term break, as in a mixed fraction form, because that always gives us the exact values, because sometimes when we write in decimals we are rounding it off, right? Okay. For a baking recipe, Lily used 92% of the required flour. If the recipe calls for 8 cups of flour, how much flour did she not use? All right. First of all, let me figure out how many she used. She used what? She used up 92% of the 8 cups. So of means multiply, and then we have 8. So 92% in a fraction is 92 over 100 times 8. Once again, simplify this on your own. You are going to get, in a decimal, it's going to be 7.36 cups. Although that's not possible because you cannot have 0.36 cups, but it's maths. Let's see what the answer is. How much flour did she not use? In the beginning, she had 8 cups. From that, she already used up 7.36 cups. So if you do 8 minus 7.36, the answer is just 0.64. I'm just looking at the answers and just writing it, as you can see, because these are stuff that we have already learned before. So I am pretty sure that you can do them on your own. Okay. Moving on, we have another question. As we can see, it's another word problem. And the basic thing about word problems is they test whether or not you do understand what to do, basically, okay? So let's see, Emily set a goal to read N books this year, and she had already completed 60% of her goal. If she has already read 15 books, what is the value for N? Okay, so she has read what? She has read 60% of how many books? Of N books. We don't know what the value is. And after completing this means that she has already read how many? 15 books. So we can actually write that 60% of the N books are the 15 books which she has already read. Now, if we convert this to basic numbers, 60% converted to a fraction is 60 over 100. Of means multiply. And then we have an N equals 15. Now we can just solve it using basic algebra. So putting 60 over 100 to the other side gives me division. And as we already know, we can do a reciprocal according to what we learned in fractions. That's what we can do. We can now simplify these out. We can do 3 times 2, 3 times 5, 2 times 1, 2 times 5. Now we have 5 and 5, which is 25. So 25 books was our goal to read this year. Okay, let's see. That's a lot of books if you think about it, but not a lot of books if you're a bookaholic. Okay, we have another practice question here. I hope that you do get the answer correctly, which is 15. Moving on. We have another practice question here, as you can see. And yeah, another word problem. Tom received 8.5% raise on his salary. If his original salary was $60,000 per year, what is his new salary? Okay, so Tom received what? An 8.5% raise. So I don't know what he originally got though, but yeah, we do know. That was 60,000. So from the 60,000 plus, because he got a raise, we need to add 8.5% of the 60,000 to the original 60,000, right? Let's say something that cost $10 now has a 20% discount. So what do? We do 100 minus 20% of that 100, right? So same here. Now let's just solve this using whatever we've learned so far. So 60,000 plus 8.5% is now going to be 8.5 divided by 100. Of means multiply 60000. Okay. Now what? Now, if you want to, you can actually do this part first. And that's going to be what? That's going to be if you want to divide this, if you want to convert it to any format, that's what you can do. Or you could even cut out these zeros, which actually leaves you with 8.5 times 600, right? And then you can do just the basic math, just like I've shown you already. Whatever you do get, if you do 85 times 600, then according to the decimal, from the right, you go to the left, one unit, and then you put the decimal there. So your final answer is going to be, I'm just writing it there. I hope you do try these on your own and then check for yourself, yeah? So the final answer is 65,100. That is his new salary. Okay, moving on, we have another question. A shirt originally cost $36, but it is on sale for 20% off. Kind of like the example that I've just told you, right? So it originally cost $36. If it's on sale for 20% off, it means that we are going to take away, so it's minus 20% off that 36, right? So let me just do it real quick. So it's going to be 20 by 100 times 36. Then what? Now you can cut the zeros off. You can also do this. So that gives me 36 minus 36 over 5. If you want to, you can very quickly do this division. 5 times 7 is 35. 1, 0, 2, right? So that's 7.2. So you are going to do 36 minus 7.2, which gives you $28.8. So that is the sale price for the shirt, as you can see. We're almost at the end of this video. Let's now look at the last question. Okay, increasing the original price of a ticket by 12% and then increasing the new price by 15% is equivalent to increasing the original price by what percent? This kind of looks like a tongue twister, but it's not. Don't get confused. It's totally fine. Let's say in questions like these, you can start off with a number. And it's easy to start off with 100 whenever we talk about percentages. If you want to increase 100 by 12%, it's just going to be 100 plus 12, which is 112. You don't even need to do anything, okay? 100 decreased by 20% is just 80. It's just 100 minus 20. So that's why I took 100 to start off with, so that it's easy, like we can do the calculations easier. But then we need to increase this new price by 15%, which now will take a little bit of work, but we can do it. So let's see. So we need to increase, which means plus. Increase this by 15%, so that's 15 over 100 of the 112. So now what? Now let's just do this. 15, this is going to be what? This is going to be 0.15 times 112. Individually, if you do that, I'm just going to check what you get, really. Okay, what you get is 128.8, okay? So this is your new one. Now, my question says that if we start from 100 and then if we go to 128.8, what is the equivalent increase? It's very simple. You know why? Because, like I said before, 100 with a 20% increase is 120. So 100 with a 28.8% increase is a 128.8, right? Which is why we started off with 128.8. So my final answer to this is going to be what? 28.8%. Okay, let's see if you have some practice questions, and that is going to be the end of this video. Yeah, we do have a practice question. Hope you do get 20% here. And another one, I hope you do get this one correctly as well. So with that being said, that is the end of this lesson. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want more practice materials and videos like this, make sure to download our SHSAT Prep app from Apple App Store. You are going to find out a lot of practice materials. And at the same time, there's a predictive test waiting for you so that it's going to give you a real feel of what the exam is going to feel like. Thank you so much for watching once again. Make sure to check out our next lessons and at the same time, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more.